You did it this morning. Maybe you saw someone's life on a screen and felt something shift inside you. A quiet deflation. A sudden awareness of everything you do not have not done, are not yet. Maybe you caught yourself calculating their age, their achievements, their circumstances versus yours. In the time it took to scroll past a single image, you do not choose to compare. It simply happens. And then you feel worse, and you tell yourself to stop, and a few minutes later you are doing it again. This is not a character flaw. This is not a modern problem caused by social media. This is one of the oldest, most deeply wired behaviors in the human brain. A mechanism so essential to your ancestors' survival that evolution built it directly into the architecture of how you process the social world. The urge to compare yourself to others is not weakness. It is ancient intelligence, and understanding why it exists will change how you relate to it forever. Start at the beginning. Tens of thousands of years ago, your ancestors lived in small, tight groups of roughly 50 to 150 people. Within those groups, relative position mattered enormously. Not in a vain or superficial sense, in a survival sense. Where you stood in the social hierarchy determined your access to food, to mates, to protection, to shelter, to the resources that kept you alive and allowed you to reproduce. In that world, knowing your position relative to others was not optional. It was a constant, essential assessment that your brain needed to run at all times, because small shifts in relative standing had real consequences for survival. Someone moving up in the group's esteem meant resources shifted toward them and potentially away from you. Someone demonstrating superior skill or strength changed the landscape of who the group would turn to in a crisis. Your ancestors who tracked these dynamics carefully, who were acutely attuned to where they stood relative to others, were better positioned to navigate the group, to compete effectively, to form the right alliances, and ultimately to survive. The ones who were indifferent to their relative standing had less information about the social world they depended on and paid a price for it. This is how the comparison drive was built, not by some cosmic accident, not because humans are shallow, by millions of years of selection pressure rewarding the brains that were most sensitive to social position and status signals. And then came civilization, agriculture, cities, the internet. Today you have access to the curated highlight reels of billions of people simultaneously. Your ancient social comparison system, built for a village of 150, is now attempting to process the relative status, achievements, beauty, wealth, and success of an effectively unlimited sample of the human population, carefully filtered to show the best moments of the best positioned people. It was never designed for this. And it is running at full capacity, all the time, on inputs that guarantee you will almost always find someone doing better by whatever metric your brain happens to select in that moment. Psychologist Leon Festinger first formally described this drive in 1954 in what he called social comparison theory. His core insight was that humans have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own opinions, abilities, and standing, and that when objective standards are unavailable, we do this by comparing ourselves to other people. This is not pathological. Festinger saw it as a basic cognitive function, a way of calibrating your self-assessment against the external social reality you are embedded in. But Festinger also identified something crucial. The comparison tends to be lateral. You do not typically compare yourself to people in radically different life circumstances. You compare yourself to people you perceive as similar to you. Similar age, similar background, similar social context. This is because the comparison is most informative when the person being compared is genuinely similar. A gap between you and someone with wildly different resources tells you nothing useful about what you personally are capable of. This is why the person who triggers the most intense social comparison reaction is rarely a celebrity or a billionaire. It is your peer, your colleague, your old classmate, the person whose life runs along parallel tracks to yours, making the comparison feel pointed, and the gap feel like a verdict on you specifically. Neuroscience has added a rich layer to Festinger's framework. Researchers studying social comparison have found that the brain processes upward comparisons with people doing better than us, in overlapping regions with physical pain processing. A 2010 study published in Science by Naomi Eisenberger and colleagues showed that social pain and physical pain share neural substrates. The sting of social comparison is not metaphorical. It is a measurable neurological event, and downward comparisons, looking at people doing worse than us, activate reward circuitry. There is a reason Schadenfreude exists in every human culture. The momentary relief of a downward comparison is a real neurological reward, and your brain knows it. This is the uncomfortable truth at the center of social comparison. Your brain is actively motivated to seek both the pain of upward comparison and the reward of downward comparison, because both provide information about where you stand. The system is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it evolved to do. But here is what evolution could not have anticipated. The information it is gathering in the modern world is almost entirely false. Social media profiles are not windows into lives. They are curated performances. Selections of the best moments, the most flattering angles, the achievements worth announcing, the milestones worth celebrating. The failures, the mediocrity, the long ordinary stretches of life between the highlights. These are invisible. Your ancient social comparison system, built to read real-time, full-spectrum signals from people living alongside you, is now reading edited content designed to communicate a specific, enhanced version of someone's life. You are comparing your interior, your doubts, your bad days, your unfinished goals, your private anxieties, to other people's exteriors. And your brain, which evolved to treat social signals as largely accurate, has no built-in skepticism for this kind of systematic distortion. Psychologist Sherry Turkle has spent decades studying how digital life changes human psychology. Her research shows that people consistently report feeling worse about themselves after periods of social media use, not because they are weak or vain, but because the comparison inputs they are receiving are structurally skewed in a way that makes almost anyone feel like they are falling short. There is another dimension to this that goes even deeper. Research by psychologists Jonah Berger and Chip Heath on what they call identity-based consumption shows that people use social comparison not just to assess where they stand, but to define who they are. The groups you compare yourself to, the people you measure yourself against, are also signaling something about who you identify with, who you want to be, what world you are trying to belong to. This means social comparison is not purely about status. It is also about identity construction. When you compare yourself to someone and feel the gap, part of what you are feeling is the distance between who you are now and who you want to become. That gap is not just painful. It is, in the right conditions, motivating. The comparison drive can be a navigational tool, pointing toward the version of yourself you are trying to build. The problem is not that you compare. The problem is the environment you are comparing within, and the absence of any counterbalance to the relentlessly upward, relentlessly curated direction of most modern social comparison inputs. Psychologist Sonja Lyubomirsky's research on subjective well-being consistently shows that chronic upward social comparison is one of the most reliable predictors of unhappiness, not because the comparing itself is harmful, but because the modern environment makes it almost impossible to compare in a direction that produces accurate, useful information. You end up comparing your realistic self to an unrealistic standard, repeatedly, and your brain registers the gap as evidence of inadequacy. But here is what that gap actually is. It is a measurement artifact, a product of the data your ancient system is being fed, not a verdict on your worth or your trajectory. Your ancestors compared themselves to 50 people they actually knew, in real time, with all the complexity and failure and ordinariness that real human lives contain. You are comparing yourself to a carefully curated highlight reel of billions of people, filtered by an algorithm designed to maximize your engagement, which often means maximizing your envy, your aspiration, and your sense of inadequacy, because those emotional states keep you scrolling. The drive to compare is not the enemy. It is ancient, it is functional, and in the right environment, a real one, with real people showing real lives. It is genuinely useful. What it cannot do is give you accurate information in a system designed to distort the inputs. So the next time you feel that quiet deflation, that sudden awareness of everything you are not yet, remember, your brain is doing exactly what it was built to do. It is reading the social world around you and trying to calibrate your position within it. It is running software that kept your ancestors alive for 100,000 years. It just was not built for a feed.